Hey there, everyone. It is Mav. This is Mav Magic, a place where I am trying to help my trans brothers, sisters, and siblings become their higher selves. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about non-binary identity, trans non-binary identity, what that looks like, what that means, and what it means for me specifically. So obviously, my channel is pretty new, and I just kind of want to get to know y'all a little bit, and I want you all to get to know me. And my non-binary identity is a pretty big part of my life, and a pretty big part of my identity. So I figured it's pretty important for just me to talk a little bit about some of the spheres of my life. And this one is pretty important. So let's get started. Before we really do anything, I want to answer the question, what is trans non-binary? So a person who is trans is someone who doesn't identify with their assigned gender at birth. So if you are assigned female, I was assigned female at birth, and you no longer identify with that, you would fall under the trans umbrella. Not everyone who chooses not to identify with their assigned gender chooses to identify as trans. So I feel like that's something that's important to say, but that's personally how I understand it, and that's really what it means for me personally. And the non-binary aspect is just anyone who falls outside of the gendered binary that we live in our society, male or female. So some people will identify as like a blend of both, maybe a little bit of both, like a both and type of thing. But sometimes it's neither nor. Sometimes we just fall outside of the gender binary. Some people don't really feel connected to any gender labels at all, and that's all okay. So typically anyone who falls in that category would fall in the non-binary sphere of things. Just to define a couple of important terms, we want to think about gender identity, gender expression, and like biological sex. So when we consider gender identity, that is each person's own understanding of their gender in their mind, of how much manness, womanness, or neitherness they hold. This obviously fluctuates for different people. Everyone has a gender identity, even if people don't really understand what their gender identity is. Everybody has a gender identity. The next thing is talking about gender expression. And this really has to do with how you choose to express your internal understanding of your gender externally. So this could be with your hair, with clothing, with how you choose to keep your body hair, anything like that. That's all connected to your gender expression. Next, we want to talk about biological sex. This pretty much deals with the like anatomy and your like chromosomal makeup. So that can express itself in a lot of different ways, with your body parts, with your hormone levels. Different things like that will determine what your biological gender or biological sex is at birth. So now we kind of have those basic definitions out of the way. I might have missed some important parts of that, but I just kind of wanted to give a general overview of that. I want to talk a little bit more about what like non-binariness looks like for me and my journey and how I got to this place. So I've been identifying as a non-binary for about a year now. I think it was last like July when things really started kind of standing out really strongly in my mind that I was non-binary, and I really started to get the language around what non-binary really meant and what that was. And I have to tell you, it was probably the most liberating experience that I have ever had in my entire life. For a long time, I really just struggled with where I fit, I think, and I didn't always have words to describe the discomfort. And now I kind of know that's dysphoria that I was experiencing. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm just so grateful for language around non-binary identity, and being able to really understand myself and being able to really just try and live against the binary, even in our society. But at the same time, like my gender my gender identity isn't a political statement. I've had people ask me that, and I find it pretty annoying actually, because um, sometimes some things just become political statements, but that really doesn't, I think takes away from a specific person's experience of what they're going through, and it can really belittle people's experience. So I think that's sometimes can be really frustrating when people assume that's the only reason why people do this. If there is someone who does it for a political reason, more power to you. But that's just not necessarily where I'm coming from. The first time I ever heard of the term non-binary, or really, I might have heard about it before, people who identified as genderless. I think I've heard of that before, even after I came out as queer. But really just like the actual picture of someone who is non-binary and kind of discovered their non-binary gender was through the TV show Transparent. There are some issues with that show, just because of the star of the show. And yeah, but I'm not really going to get into that here. But I'm grateful for that show for presenting a non-binary person. And that was pretty much the first time I saw myself on screen. And that was really, really powerful for me. Seeing someone who kind of went through that transition and had a little bit more of an androgynous presentation, because that's kind of where I felt like I landed. So I first started using she, they pronouns. So I was assigned female at birth. I've used she, her pronouns I had used she, her pronouns for my entire life, but I wanted to try something different, and they, them pronouns just really felt right for me. But I felt like I was kind of like testing the waters first, because I was too scared to just do it straight on. And that just was my personal experience. I thought that it was okay, and I thought that weird feeling that I got every time someone else used she, her pronouns for me was just normal, but it's not. That's a little bit more of that like social dysphoria that I started experiencing. So pretty much every single time I would hear she, her pronouns used for me, it was like a weird dagger in my stomach, and it was really uncomfortable. And so I really had to kind of have a conversation with myself and understand that no, they, them pronouns are really what goes for me. More of a gender neutral perspective is really what I want. And that's what really most closely fits with my gender identity. And that was really liberating. I love being non-binary. It is such a joy for me to understand, to really have a full understanding of my gender. Sometimes I wonder if this is what cis people feel like their whole life, just really knowing who they are. And I'm in my mid-20s, and I have discovered this thing, and I feel like it's opened a whole brand new world of things for me, and it has been incredible. I had always known, or rather, I had always really felt connected to trans people in general for all of my life. And especially the trans masculine experience. But at the same time, I knew that I wasn't a man, and I knew that I'm not a man. I know that I'm not a man. So for a long time, because binary transness was the only thing that I had really seen or heard of, I thought that really wasn't going to be for me, or it wasn't possible for me. But when I was able to understand that, yeah, there are more than just the two boxes that have been presented to the majority of us as I live in America, so as the majority of Americans, it's pretty limited. And I got sick and tired of being limited. I knew that I was something different, and being able to have language for it was so, so incredible. One of the really important things about language is that having language for something can really help create community and understanding for what is there. I explained to someone one time that my non-binary identity really felt kind of like, I was able to understand it in terms of day and night. So when we look at daytime and nighttime, we pretty much know what that looks like when we go outside, and we have names for when it's day and when it's night. But when the sky is like a mixture of those colors, it can have that beautiful, the sunset can have that gorgeous, those oranges, and the way that the sky can almost glow up, like that looks a lot different than what daytime and nighttime looks like. But it still exists in the same sphere, right? I really understood that we know that dawn and dusk have names, right? And we know that they are these ways of describing the sky when it's not quite nighttime or it's not quite daytime. And I felt like that was almost the way that I kind of understood my gender. But we have names for dawn and we had names for dusk. So when people said those things, they knew what to think about. But when people would hear non-binary, they wouldn't know what that meant. And also on the opposite spectrum, I had the feelings of being non-binary, but no language to describe what that meant. And so that's one of the other reasons why I'm so grateful for figuring out my gender identity and understanding it more. So in terms of like my gender expression, I tend to present a little bit more on the masculine side. One of the first things that I did after I had, because I've always like worn button-up shirts, flannels were my favorite. I think lots of AFAB people who want to look masculine, I think a lot of times will kind of go through a flannel phase. At least I did, and a lot of folks that I know have gone through that phase. But more than that, like I think that some of the discomfort like around my chest was some of the loudest that I experienced, and that really kind of highlighted the need, or some of the real dysphoria and the need and understanding that like transition was going to be right for me. So one of the first things that I did was I purchased a binder, and man, those really did change the game for me. The way that clothes started to fit and the way that my chest looked when it was compressed was just so euphoric. It was incredible. I started to really love the appearance of a flat chest and kind of thinking of myself with a flatter chest. And I kind of sat with those feelings and was binding for several months. And even as I was binding for several months, I noticed that the dysphoria that I felt, like the times where I didn't wear a binder or couldn't wear a binder anymore, because you really shouldn't be binding for hours and hours a day. Like during those moments, I would feel really uncomfortable and would want to do something a little bit different. So after I understood that my chest was bringing me a lot of discomfort, I started really considering top surgery. And that was probably in like early this year. Probably similar to the same time when I really started thinking heavily about going on testosterone. And so I think that I started calling for some places to look into top surgery and ended up getting a consultation. And I actually have a consultation next week. So that's super exciting. And maybe I'll post a video about some of that stuff too. Yeah, like it is so, yeah, I'm so excited to do that, and so excited just to be able to have a flatter chest all the time. I can talk a little bit more about like the kind of top surgery I want if that's something that y'all are interested in. Talking about testosterone. So I started testosterone about four months ago. It was mid-February, and I started on a full dose of testosterone, and just so that things could really start to get going, could start seeing some of the changes a little bit quicker. I knew that I didn't want to stay on a high dose of testosterone for forever. I was really interested in more of like a low dose of testosterone, just to see how my body would start to change and react to it. One of the things that I knew that I didn't want was like excessive facial hair. And so even after just a few short months, it was maybe 2 months after I started doing that full dose of testosterone, I really started knowing some of the facial hair starting to come in, and I still have some of it right now. And so after that, then my provider lowered the dose quite a bit, and so that has been a lot. I've noticed that things have slowed down, and I felt a lot more comfortable. I really started getting nervous about all the changes that I was seeing, so it was awesome for me to just get on lower dose, knowing that like I could really control as best as possible how my body was changing, how I could see, how I saw what was happening, and now I'm at a place where I'm pretty excited about the changes that are going on. Some of the first things that I noticed were my voice dropping, just like feeling scratchy, and my throat would hurt, and my voice kind of kept dropping little by little. Bottom growth was also a very welcome change, something that I was very much looking forward to, and that has been going great. Another thing is just thinking about like, my wife actually mentioned that like she can notice my face starting to kind of shift a little bit, and that was probably the best compliment I've ever received. So that was super exciting. Oftentimes, like I know that my face appears like can appear very feminine or whatever, and so like that's definitely something. The more angular face is something that I'm like looking forward to seeing. There's just so much that we could talk about here, but I'm gonna cut it right here, just giving you a little bit of an update on like what my transition is looking like, some other topics that I would love to hear. If you want to hear any more about any of these things that I've talked about, leave a comment down below and I will surely make a video about it, chat with y'all about what's going on there. I'm so grateful for this opportunity just to chat with y'all and get to know some people out there, some other folks who are going through transition. No matter what your transition is looking like, trans feminine, trans masculine, trans other forms of trans that might exist out there, let me know what your experiences are like. I would love to hear about it. Also, if you could just give this video a like, and please subscribe to the channel so you can be checking out the videos that I'm posting. It's looking like we're going to be posting videos every Friday, so I'm hoping to stick with that schedule. If you want to check out any other of my videos, you'll see them pop up here. Just want to say thanks again. You are loved and cherished, and no matter where you're at in your journey, take a deep breath. Know that joy is always around, even in the midst of pain. Real quick, even though there are some times that things are really great, there still are frustrating times. So just letting y'all know, keep hope. You got this. Peace and love.